interest will be protected. But once you have conspiracy among them, the public interest will be undermined.
4 times since the 1940s, the U.S. government has investigated De Beers and its associates under the Sherman Act. But bringing a South African company to American justice has proved almost impossible.
We hired a South African solicitor to serve a notice on De Beers in South Africa. It took a while to get any South African lawyer who was willing to even serve the paper. Eventually, one agreed, and he wrote us an affidavit of his experience, which was that he took the court paper and took it to De Beers, and that the De Beers representative took the paper, ripped it into small shreds, threw it on the ground, and stamped on it, and then basically threw him out.
And the cartel has successfully kept its executives beyond the reach of American justice.
I'll tell you, when the red flag goes up from their lawyers, these guys are not allowed to set foot in the U.S. Name goes on a computer, beep, 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 beep. I'm sorry, sir, we have to subpoena you. And under a subpoena in the U.S., you have no rights. You have to tell everything. You cannot lie. You cannot plead irrelevance. It's for them to decide what's irrelevant. It's not like a court where you have certain rights. And so on occasion, when I interview these guys, they always tell me, Al, the best exit from the U.S. is always Chicago's O'Hare Airport. That's where we're ordered to get to immediately because they're the laxest in terms of immigration. We can get right out of the country.
While a subsidiary once paid a nominal fine, De Beers has avoided prosecution in the U.S. Not only has the Justice Department found it impossible to touch the Oppenheimers in South Africa, it has been unable to penetrate the cartel's respectable London operation.
It's well known that the British government has historically been vigorously opposed to any U.S. enforcement of antitrust laws against activity that takes place in Great Britain. And as we know, a great deal of what De Beers does takes place in Great Britain.
Now, the United States has been extending its reach outside its boundaries, sort of as we have done by seizing General Noriega in Panama and prosecuting him with American laws. We've been doing this more and more. And I don't think it's inconceivable that at a certain point, the fiction that the American diamond industry, the stores that sell, and the merchants that sell the diamonds, and sell most of the diamonds in the world, and sell them to American customers, the idea that De Beers is not acting in cahoots with them in America by putting rules on them in London, that I think that fairly soon the Department of Justice will come to the idea that even though the diamonds are handed over in London, they're handed over with rules and stipulations which mean that De Beers is operating in the American market. And De Beers could be tried if they came to that decision, which I think is eventually they will.
And the Justice Department may now be closing in on one alleged De Beers operation. Synthetic diamonds were developed long ago for use in industry. De Beers has its own factory in Ireland. Its biggest international rival is General Electric. The Sherman Act strictly limits how two giants like De Beers and GE can work together. But the relationship they developed in the 80s has been brought into question.
GE developed this process for making a pure C12 diamond. And I was widely quoted in the international press that this would be a several $100 million opportunity for us. But to do it, we had to grow gemstones. And we started a process for growing gemstones. And after a short period of time, we were making gemstones 3 to 4 carats, flawless E's, which is a very high grade of diamonds. And because we were growing them synthetically, we had a number of advantages. We could make them all the same size, and you could color them. You could make them blues. So it was very easy to grow a 3 or 4 carat blue diamond. Once having established our technical capability to do that, we started to look at the $4 billion gemstone market.
But as soon as Ed Russell began to edge beyond industrials and towards the valuable market for gems, he ran into resistance within GE from his own immediate boss.
Glenn Heiner, who was at this time meeting with De Beers on a regular basis and having phone calls and what have you, simply killed the project and said, we will not compete with De Beers, period.
Soon afterwards, Ed Russell was fired. He's now suing GE for wrongful discharge and alleging it is involved in a cartel with De Beers.
What happened after I was terminated, a price increase on all industrial diamond products was put in by GE and De Beers. They followed each other at identical prices that were implemented.
In his lawsuit, Russell claims GE fired him for blowing the whistle about its dealings with De Beers. The Justice Department has investigated, and for more than a year, a federal grand jury has been hearing evidence on the price-fixing allegation. General Electric denies any wrongdoing, saying it met with De Beers only to discuss exchanging technology, and fired Russell because of his poor job performance. Back in South Africa, still the center of its power, the diamond cartel is also dealing with a political earthquake. What impact will the dismantling of apartheid have on the De Beers monopoly? Harry Oppenheimer, the man who ran the cartel for 25 years, has been a long-time critic of the South African government's apartheid policy.
More peaceful conditions in South Africa as a whole. We have to believe, and by our practice demonstrate, that the pursuit of business efficiency and the search for a free and just society are not contradictory objectives, but in fact two aspects of the same thing, two sides of one coin.
He himself has publicly come out against apartheid on many occasions and continues to do so. I think the problem is, and this is where he's been criticized in the past, the problem is that the mining houses that he controlled made use of the migrant labor system. They made use of the compound system. They made use of the pass laws. They made use of all the institutions which in fact created apartheid. So in that sense, people questioned why, on the one hand, does this man oppose apartheid, but on the other hand, he makes money out of apartheid.
High up near Bulawayo, visited by
100 years ago, De Beers founder Cecil Rhodes laid the groundwork for the cartel's success in South Africa.
Ironically, the famous empire builder, in his commercial activities, turning the early diamond rush into a vast industry, sowed the seeds of apartheid.
Particularly after they discovered the diamond mines, what they were looking for was to try and create a workforce for those mines. And the problem was that they needed unskilled workers. But the problem was that most of the available potential labor force were black people living on the land. And in order to get them into the mines, they had to find ways of forcing them off the land. And one of the mechanisms they adopted was passing various taxes, such as poll tax, hut tax, even a dog tax, which forced people living on the land to pay cash to the government. And they didn't have cash because they were not part of a cash economy. So they therefore had to go into the mines to earn the money to pay the taxes.
In order to pay their taxes, many Africans had to leave their families behind and walk hundreds of miles to work in the mines. Once inside, a miner could not leave until his contract was over. De Beers' closed compounds became the model for the entire mining industry in South Africa. By the 1960s, these compounds had expanded into enormous complexes housing thousands of men.
Well, no, he arrived in the